Three, two, one. Hey everybody, my name is John DePietro, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to another edition of My Life with Kenny Rogers. But here's the best part about it, folks. It's not my life with Kenny Rogers we're going to talk about, but the life of our guest. And today we're going to talk with Mr. Girard Stewart in the great state of Ohio, and he has been responsible for providing choirs for 11, count that folks, 11 Kenny Rogers show. And we're going to be with him in just a second, but we want to tell you this, that this is one of a series of several events that we're doing about, commemorating Kenny's career, his phenomenal 60-year career. And if you want to get in on all of them, then all you have to do is down at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little red button that says subscribe. Hit that button. And then there's another bell, hit the bell, and then every time we do a new one, so there's 4 of these that we've done today, you will get notification of it. Remember, this is not sold in stores, and it's available only on this YouTube offer. And with that being said, Mr. Stewart, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you. Good day to you, sir.
I've heard great things about you, and you kind of have a little bit of a different story than the normal choir directors that we're dealing with here, because today we talked with Dave Twist, who was a high school choir director, and he had a new crop of kids coming in every few years, actually every year. One would graduate and fresh one would come in. But your story is a little bit different. Tell us about where you are in the great Buckeye State, and about the types of choirs that you were able to put together for Kenny's Christmas shows.
Sure. Well, I'm in Northern Ohio. Folks want to know where I'm at. Presently, I'm sitting in my office in Akron, Ohio. But my group is based out of Columbus, Ohio. It's people from all over the state that we are, I guess you could refer to us as a senior group. Many of us sang together as young people almost 50 years ago. And, one day I was teaching at a dance studio, which had a vocal department, and I was handling the vocal department. And lo and behold, I got a call from the director that says, "Hey, some lady from Kenny Rogers called and wants some kids for a Christmas show." I said, "What'd you tell them?" She says, "I told them they had to talk to you. You were my musical director." I said, "No, Kenny Rogers calls, you say yes." And
then we'll figure it out, right?
Yeah. I said,
say yes, and then we'll figure it out.
Yes, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I got on the phone, and that's the day I met Dawn Bubas. And Dawn had a situation, and she needed kids for the Christmas show, which Kenny always has done, for years, toy shop, everything. And so I had the kids. I was able to say yes to that and provide the kids. But 2 days later, Dawn calls me and says, "Hey, I'm having a problem finding choirs in the Youngstown area," because this show was designed for Youngstown, Ohio. And I says, "Well, let me see what I can do to help." So I get on the phone, I call local high schools, I called Youngstown State University, and found out there was a huge Christmas festival in downtown Youngstown on the day of the show, and they were already committed.
Everybody's already got something to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I get back to Dawn, I tell her, "Dawn," I said, "this thing is already booked up. There's not much we can do about that." And she says, "Well, can you help me?" And at this point, I said, "Okay, I'm going to do what I can do."
Because you know, Mr. Stewart, the show must go on, right?
And, you don't turn down guys like Kenny Rogers. I'm sorry, man. So I called some old friends from Columbus, all over the state, and we put together a group. I got the charts. We rehearsed the charts. We went and did the show. And it really was not a formal group at all. It was just me getting some people together to cover the show.
So you basically scrambled. You put together not a bunch of kids from a high school, because, again, they were all tied up. And you were able to put together a group. And the audience didn't know that, right?
No, they didn't.
I mean, you even came up with the name, The Voices of Ohio?
Yes, sir, we did. And
right. Okay. Now, how far is Youngstown from Columbus?
It's about a 3-hour drive.
3-hour drive. And people don't realize that out here in New England, you can be in 5 of the 6, 6 New England states all within an hour. But the state of Ohio, I know because I drove it from Erie, PA over to Indiana. That's a
Yeah.
long way across. And oh, by the way, how long did you have to talk to Dawn before you found out that her husband Keith is from Columbus?
It was a couple shows later before
Oh,
that all
really?
happened. Yeah, and you know, I knew I made friends with Keith because when we went in for the first sound check, they allot an hour plus to bring the choirs in and get adjusted, and we did ours in 10 minutes. So
10
Keith loved,
minutes.
you know, because we were ready, and
Okay.
I had history of being on a professional stage with musicians like the guys, and so I knew what they were expecting. I felt I knew, and
You respected
yeah.
their time.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Now, one thing I hear that you didn't respect, Mr. Stewart, was the number of people that they told you could have in the choir.
I
So I'm
wonder who
told that
told you
every
that.
year you kind of like expanded, you know, a few more years later would have been the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Tell me about that.
Well, I never did it without permission. But I became a good beggar. And to continue in the story, you know, after we did that first Kenny show, really no group. About a month later, my son was saying, Dad, you know, you put your career down for me and Sis. He says, you need to go back and do you. Why don't you start? I saw how much fun you had with the pressure of putting that show together for Kenny Rogers. Why don't you go ahead and put a group together? So thus was really born the Voices of Ohio 2 months after Kenny Rogers. And Kenny, we used to always say on stage, this is the group that I started. Because if it wasn't for Kenny, we wouldn't be together today.
Yeah. So how many people did you have to, you know, when you're not talking 6, 7, 8 guys, right?
Yeah, okay. Come back directly to your question. The first time they wanted to keep like 20, 25 on the stage. And I think the first show I did put 35, squeezed them all together real tight. And I pleaded and they said, okay, because you bailed us out last year, we're going to give you a break. And so it would be between 35 and 30 that we would do consistently after that.
And you said these people came from every corner of the state.
Absolutely. Cincinnati, Dayton, Youngstown, near Wheeling, West Virginia, Toledo, Columbus, Ohio, from all 4 corners of the state. Yes, sir.
And Don, I call you Don, but Gerard, I don't know why I call you Don, but Gerard, that is a commitment because Christmas shows tend to happen in November and December, and the weather in Ohio could be anything.
They did not miss rehearsals. They did not miss rehearsals. You know, I mean, come on. I mean, this is Kenny Rogers. You know, how often do you get a chance to go on with a legend like that? And after we did the first one, or actually the second one, my people got a real taste of it. And it was never an issue, never an issue.
So 11 years or 11 shows over 10 years, you said. So
yes,
you guys kind of like, you know, planned on a November, December time frame that when Kenny came to town, you were going to be there.
Absolutely. And like you had alluded to, you know, during that time of year, most groups or choral or vocal performance groups, they're working on a Christmas show. I banked on, we did not do a Christmas show. After a certain time, once I got a call, I'd usually hear it October, sometimes at the latest. We just kept that time open. We didn't do a Christmas show. We were hell bent on getting back on that stage with Kenny Rogers and all those great musicians.
So what was the gender makeup? How much men, how much women, and tell me about where the age range, Stewart, as to
yeah, the Voices of Ohio
age range.
Yes, sir. The Voices of Ohio. Like I said, I ran about 30 on the books. At one time, I had as many as 60. I have about 40 right now on the books. But the age range is really, our average age is somewhere in the mid 50s. And but I've had young people on stage with us. But for the most part, they're retired or semi-retired. They're doctors. They're lawyers. They're school teachers, principals. They're all professional people. But again, many of us sang years ago with a group called the Ohio Youth Choir out of Columbus when we were kids. And we had to get those voices back in shape, but it worked out really well.
So I'm sure they all looked forward to it. Was there much turnover?
Oh, no, no. I put in a rule that you had to participate in so many rehearsals, you had to participate in so many of the shows during the year, because, I can't lock people in, because, we did a lot of volunteer work and donated the money we earned back to charities. And, but they always met that criteria, because they knew that if Kenny called, or I got a call from KRP, that they had to meet that criteria to get on that stage.
Okay. So that was really, it was a year-long commitment for to be on that stage. And like you said, many of the people were of the age that they know who Kenny is,
Yes.
and the career that he had during that time period. Unlike, some of the high school kids that we've had didn't even know who Kenny was.
Well,
And
yeah.
some
And
of
don't
them were
forget,
more excited because Linda Davis was with them, and they got to meet Lady Antebellum's mother.
yes, sir. And I'm going to tell you, I did the kids portion of the show probably 5 times, where I
Okay.
put together kids groups in conjunction with my group, because Kenny split the shows. He usually would set up the Christmas shows, for those that haven't seen it, where the kids came out and they did Silent Night, and they put on little skits that Kelly Junkerman had put together. A lot of it, some of it reminded you of the toy shop setup. But, and those kids were like, who's Kenny Rogers? They'd be backstage, and their grandparents would killing for the few comps that they gave us. It's usually the grandparents would sit in the comp seats, and mom and dad bought seats in the back of the theater because
Back of the room.
Kenny.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Kenny he was so good to the kids, to the little kids. I mean, because we really have 2 separate groups here. We have the 6 or 7 little kids, okay, that range in age from 5 to 9 or so.
Yes.
And a lot of them go to performing arts schools and that type of thing that don't have stage fright. But when you're on a stage, and I don't know how big the arenas were that you dealt with, but when we were in New England and doing the casinos, we were in front of 7,000 to 10,000 people. And the kids look out into the audience, they can't see anything because all the lights are on them. Do you ever hear from the kids later on in years thanking you for selecting them?
Absolutely. And it's kind of strange, because the last show we did with Kenny, this was just before he stepped down. I had just had open heart surgery. I really wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't tell anybody in KRP that I still had stitches. I hired one of the kids who was in my first Kenny children's group, who now is an adult, and he drove me to Pittsburgh. And then at the end of the show, Kenny found out that I was not my 100%, but we pulled the show off. And I said, by the way, Kenny, this is Adam. He was in the first Kenny group that I did in Youngstown. He took that kid, put his arm around him, took him back, and introduced him to, hey, this is one of our kids, And Adam felt so wonderful. He's an adult now, and he was so proud of that.
Yeah. We should tell our audience that are watching, when you say KRP, you mean Kenny Rogers Productions, not WKRP in Cincinnati.
You betcha.
Right?
Kenny Rogers Productions.
You know that. So you got to work with Steve. Steve would send you the charts every year.
Yeah. I got to work with Steve, who is just a prince of a gentleman and one heck of a player. And, that was the other thing, probably one of my first real connections with Randy Dorman. And then I met Annie. I was standing outside one day, long time ago, and I was getting some air before we went to go live. And Annie Dorman comes out, and she starts talking to me. One thing led to another, and she says, "Do you know Randy's got an album?" And I said, "No." And so I get a Christmas package from Ann Dorman with all of Randy Dorman's recordings.
Yeah.
And, I'm being a jazz player myself.
Oh, that's right. I
immediately started listening. Yeah. And,
Click.
I've always enjoyed his playing. He's just, you could tell when you're with masters. He's a master. Yeah. He's not a household name, but he is a master guitar player.
And then Kelly kind of directed the whole thing with where to stand, where to sit, when to when to do it. I mean, I'm sure that they appreciated the fact that they didn't have to start all over with a new group every year, and that people like you were, number one, honored to do the show, and secondly, even if there were alterations in the show, you nailed them, and the group must have felt more confident as the years went on.
They did it, and one of the joyful things was after maybe the second or third show, you'd see you walk into the venue and hit your, be it a report on time, and have them say, "Oh, it's Girard," and the voices, "Great guys, we go to lunch early tonight, or we do dinner tonight." And Kenny was like, "Oh yeah, man, this is great. We don't have to worry about this one. We got this one." And I know they meant it, but it meant a lot to us.
And they did mean it, because I saw times when there were choirs that were, didn't quite prepare properly.
Well, we had a challenge. I remember Brian, I think his name was Brian Parkos. He worked the onstage monitors.
Yep.
And Brian had told me, maybe the second gig, he says, I said, "You got a track running, right, with the choirs?" He says, "We always got to protect ourselves and protect the show." And I said, "So my goal is," I said, "are you pushing that slider up or down when we're on?" He says, "Right now, it's down." He says, the harmonies are tight, and everything's hitting on the rhythm. Matter of fact, he used to give me a click track in my ear. But then when we start the show, I was placed between, I can't remember the drummer's name, but I was right between the drummer and Chuck Jacobs, the bass player. Yeah. So I'm between 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't need a click track. I'm right here. So I would always take it out of my ear. And after the third year, he says, "You want one?" I said, "Nope. I'm listening to the drummer and the bass player."
It's interesting that you say I couldn't remember the drummer, because if it was in the last 5 years, it was Mike Zimmerman. And, yes. Prior to that, it was Lynn Hammond. But
I had them both.
Kenny forgot Zimmerman's name on the Fox and Friends show in the morning when he was introducing the group. And he goes, "And that's, here's Chuck, Steve, Brian, what's his name?" So it became a joke that nobody could remember Zimmerman's name.
Yeah.
So then you must have also, if you did over 10 years, you worked with either Rebecca Lynn Howard or Billy Dean.
Yes.
And I'm sure you worked with Linda Davis.
We started working, when we first came out, Rebecca Lynn Howard was there and Billy Dean. And then she moved away, and then we had Billy Dean for a couple shows, and then Linda Davis stepped up. And I love me some Linda Davis. She did a solo. She did a lot of stuff in that show, but she did a solo every year to Go Tell It on the Mountain with the choir backing her up. Yep. And I remember rehearsing my group. La 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 la. Yeah. And I remember rehearsing my group, and they were singing it, and I says, "Some of y'all need to go to a Baptist church or something and listen to. You need to get online." I said, and this is a joke amongst the Kenny Rogers folks and myself. And I said, "You're no disrespect to anybody." I said, "But you're singing like Lutherans." And I said, "We got to get, she wants that down home swing, gut bucket, gospel feel. And we got to bring that. We can't sing like Lutheran." The last show we did, we were rehearsing, and Kelly was there, and we were on stage doing our sound check, and Linda wanted to run it, and we're running it, and they were, I don't know where my group was at that moment. That's when I had the stitches in my chest, and I think they were worried about me, and they were kind of mundane in rehearsal. And Kelly stops us, first time ever. He stopped us. He says, "Girard, who did you bring with you today?" I says, "This is my group." He goes, "No." He says, "They're singing like a bunch of Lutherans." And everybody cracked up. My group cracked up, and they reset the track, and they just, "Let your hair down. Let's go to work and feed off of Linda." And that's what we did.
Yeah. That's so funny, because when I did another interview with Dave Twist, a choir director in the Northeast, he used to practice that Go Tell It on a Mountain from October on. Yeah. And, he told the whole story, and, everybody loved Linda, because Linda made everybody feel special. Yes. And I think Kenny did too, but it was never that they were the stars and they were looking down as you guys as the supporting cast, right?
Never. Kenny was always so supportive. About 5 years ago, they started allowing the choirs to do like a 2-minute piece, solo
Your own
piece.
song. Yep.
And I can remember we had a mix up in communication, and I'm doing this song, and Jesus, What a Wonderful Child, and it's really like a gospel feel. And I was trying to, what fits that show? That's, when I was trying to select that piece, and I had a young lady here in Ohio who I had her do a solo. And in rehearsal, Kenny was, or Linda was on stage, and she started singing a solo, and Kelly goes, "You didn't tell me you had a solo." I said, "I told so-and-so." But we kept going, and this girl started singing. Kenny was sleeping in the dressing room right off stage, taking his break before the show. And Kenny comes out of the dressing room all disheveled and goes, "Who the hell is that?" And then he looked over, he was behind the group, and they parted, and I was like, "Uh-oh." And Kenny was like, "Oh, that's Girard. We're going to have a hell of a show tonight." And we did.
And you did. That's great. So what did you learn from working with Kenny that you take with you in your life today and times after Kenny? What was it that you saw that they had special that you wanted to say, "I want me some of that"?
I've had the pleasure or the fortune to work, whether it be backing somebody up on stage or going and subletting gear and equipment or doing things. In college, I did anything that I could to get backstage on anybody's show. And I could take you through a list of artists that I've been close to and on stage with. But Kenny was different. Kenny was totally different. What you saw with Kenny was Kenny. And, he made me feel very comfortable right in the beginning. And I remember the first time he and I met, Randy Dorman was taking pictures, doing the meet and greets, and they brought me back for that. Gene Roy came and got me, and we go back and do that. And Kenny puts his arm around me, and he goes, "Hey, brother, how you doing? Welcome." And he says, "How you doing?" I looked at him and I said, "I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in." He looked at me with a startled look, and he goes, "Do you go back that far with me?" I said, "Brother, I go back to the New Christy Minstrels with you." And it was on from there.
I just dropped in.
But Kenny, to share with your fans, Kenny you hear people say he was real. He was real. He was a genius. I mean, some of the things that he wrote and did, and if you know his history, taking chances, having the dip, then talking to Lionel, and then resurgence again. But the way he treated his family, which my family, I mean the group.
Yep.
And the way he took care of those guys. I've seen other tours, and they didn't get taken care of the way that Kenny takes care of his guys. And that made me want to participate. That made me want to be put under the pressure. There were last minute changes and things they've asked over the years. And that just made me say, I'm down, because they trust us. They trust me, and he's just a hell of a guy. And, my heart is still breaking that we've lost him. My group, we were a mess last Christmas. We were a mess. Everybody was talking back and forth. But he is that guy. Everything he says and that he ever did, and he loved his family. He loved those boys, and he loved Wanda. And God bless to all of those folks. But Kenny Rogers was a real, as my daddy used to say, I'm a product of the 60s. I grew up during the racial tensions of the 1960s. And my daddy used to say, "You see that guy over there, son? He's a regular man. Stick with him." And that's what my father would have said about Kenny Rogers.
Well, you know what? I don't think I'm going to ask you any more questions, because I think that's a great point to drop off with. But I do want to thank you so much, especially on short notice. Randy, when we did Randy and Annie the other night, we did that interview. He
great.
said, "Hey, you got to call this guy in Ohio." He goes, "He is just great." And you know what? They were right, because you did a great job of representing the Buckeye State. And, we want to thank you so much, again, on short notice. And also tell our audience that if they like this and they want to see all the others that we've done, and there's several, they're great ones from from the bus drivers to the people that hang the sound. Kenny kept them all as part of the musical family. And all you have to do is down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, hit that subscribe button. And then there's a bell, hit that bell, and every time a new one comes out, you'll get it. So on behalf of my friend, Girard Stewart, let's go out in a blaze of glory.